Hello and welcome, everyone. It's great to be on the show today. We've got a round robin, as we like to call them. I'm joined by two other advisors from the Catholic Financial Planners Network, Nick Orenduff and Charlie Horonzy.
Horonzy.
Horonzy. I just
Got
actually
it.
worked with Charlie before this. And so, folks, if you don't know this, Charlie, his name sounds a lot like Dave Ramsey, is what we realized. And so that's
You say
another
it
way
quick,
to.
it's like Dave Ramsey.
There you go. Yeah. So if you,
The
all those
Catholic
Dave
version.
Ramsey followers out there, yeah, go follow Charlie instead. That's what we have. So, well, Charlie, with that introduction, you mind just sharing a little bit of a reminder to our guests before we kick off today's episode? Just a little bit about your background and where you hail from and your firm and the like.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my name is Charlie Horonzy, not to be confused with Ramsey. And I'm from the Chicagoland area. I have a fee-only practice in Chicago, and I am a CFP as well as a CPA. So one of the things that I like to do is always look at the tax angle of everything, because at the end of the day, how do we pay the least amount to Uncle Sam over your lifetime?
Gotta love that. Yeah, Charlie, that's good stuff. So thanks for sharing a little bit about that with you. And then Nick, for yourself, in case someone's curious to learn a little bit more about you, can you share a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Nick Orenduff here, also a certified financial planner, but I'm over on the East Coast in the Richmond, Virginia area, so the capital area of Virginia, and been doing this since 2004. So you can see a few gray hairs there, and five kids and a business that I took over from my father. He actually started it in 1974. So what's that? Almost 51 years ago. So. Happy to be here today. Joined the Catholic Financial Planners Network about 2 years ago, and just glad to be here.
Well, awesome. Well, Nick and Charlie, great. Thanks for being back on the show. Looking forward to tapping your wisdom on today's topic. And so, folks, what's on our hearts and our minds, and what we wanted to chat through today was just this notion of prioritizing and maintaining a work-life balance. But it's not just like a work-life balance. Like the thing that's particularly situated, at least in my mind, in my heart, is this notion of like pouring ourselves out and like having demands and even sacrifices that we're called to undertake. And so being busy and full, like living our lives and giving as much as we can. But at the same time, recognizing that if we pour too much or do too much, we can certainly burn ourselves out, and that, we aren't the savior of the world. And so like, it's okay for us to say no. It's okay to put boundaries either on our time commitment, what we do. Maybe it's okay to put boundaries on our money, on our finances. It's okay for others to be helped by other people than just ourselves. And so, like, how do we square this away where, like, we're not asked to live a comfortable life. At least I don't believe so as Christians. Like, Jesus has some strong commands to us about his expectations of what it is to be his disciples. But, we are called to be in loving union with them and to be like to grow in deeper relationship, and for that relationship to be one that we find, satisfying, fulfilling, like it makes us happy and complete and not burnt out and belabored. And so it's like, how do we do both? And in a particular way, what we're wanting to try to, identify is just, good guidance to give you of how to set boundaries in your life and maybe how to maintain the right priority. So Nick, I don't know, there was a thought that you had at the start of this that I just felt like was a genius comment of like really setting the stage for what makes this work. And if you wouldn't mind, I'll kick it over to you. What were you thinking is like the right approach for, getting someone to be well situated?
Yeah, Ben, thank you. That's a good question. As we all know, time flies, and we have a lot of demands thrown at us from a lot of different directions. Whether you have a career where you work somewhere or whether you have your own business, the world tends to throw a lot of options at you all the time. So it's really important to have some sort of a framework to work with, right? Like you said squared away. So build a frame where you've got, God first, fully rely on God. And then the next rung would be your responsibility for your family, stewardship of your family, and the resources that God gives you to put within your family. And then the third rung would be everything else, right? I'm not saying forget about your career, but just as far as an order of things go, that's that's the order. And is it easy? No, it's not easy at all. It's kind of something you've got to work on daily, right? Wake up in the morning and make that commitment again and again and again and again. Eventually it becomes easier to do so. It becomes a habit, right? But it's never easy. There's always things that the world is throwing at us day in and day out. And, negotiating some of these things that come up it can be very, very difficult. So it also helps to have that community around you. The three of us are part of a community of Catholic financial planners, but forming a community that also holds that same kind of framework can help you stay on track as time goes by. So
I just think you're right, Nick, because someone was sharing this with me previously of this notion about look, at the end of the day, our careers are really just about serving our family. They're really about just serving God. And so when the career ceases to do that, when money ceases to do that, then we should stop. It's not actually fulfilling the purpose or the intent. And so if we allow our careers to become so demanding and time consuming that we no longer serve our family, then what's the point? We're missing out on what this career is supposed to do regardless. And I don't know, Charlie, do you have some thoughts to that? It seems placing God first and then maybe putting limits on just what we think we're going to accomplish. Is that the right way to try to start to fill out this balance between these two tensions?
Yeah, when you said that, going back, Ben, to what you said about working for the family, I think it also tying into finances. One of the things that we got to look at is where do we have our finances when it comes to work? Meaning if we're living to the extremes of our finances of what we're working, then we're always pressured into working more because you got to pay that mortgage payment, you got to pay that car payment, you got to do all that. So we have an option where we don't have to live to the extremes of our finances, and then you don't have to have the work just be a slave. It's more than we can align it towards our family. So I thought that was really interesting when you said that, is how do we really look at the finances of everything when it comes to the gifts that God gave us when it comes to our work. But going back to your question, though, I think that, having God first is important and family second, of course. But I would say as far as career goes, career is more, I would put it on a plane a little bit higher than other things because of that family aspect. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's really tough as Catholics is how do we work enough, but we also don't get taken in by the worldly standards of trying to make money and that security that money brings. Because as we save and we continue to save, one of the things that I want to explore and that I'm dealing with personally too is how much should you make before you really try to say, okay, this is enough? Because there's always that, oh, what happens if there's a recession? What happens if this? What happens if that? But at the end of the day, is that where is God calling us to serve and to look at our finances? And when it comes to the work aspect, the family aspect, and the God aspect.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it, Charlie? Because we all have this fear of especially maybe it's just our line or our career. We call ourselves financial advisors or financial planners, but in a lot of ways we're financial preparers. We're anticipating all these possibilities of what may happen. And then if this scenario plays out, we've anticipated that possibility and we've got it covered. But we can't possibly cover all possibilities. There's too many things. And at the end of the day, life is outside of our control. And we do have to have this resignation or abandonment where we let go and we just let God, as that expression says and implies. And, that puts us at a point of vulnerability. And, we really were trusting. It's like a trust fall, backwards, as if you've ever done one of those. It's like a trust fall onto God and being this could go really badly for me, but I'm going to trust that God will catch me and that it's going to be okay. This isn't all about just me, trying to accomplish all this and then saying it's for my family, perhaps as the provider for the family, or saying I'm doing it even, let's say we're more altruistically oriented and we're doing things for the church or doing things for the greater good of society. We can we can keep ourselves really, really busy and then kind of fail. I think that's the thing that's odd for me is like, even though you're just super, super busy, you may not actually be pouring yourself out. Maybe your motivations are rather selfishly driven, and you're actually, rather than taking like this step in this expanse of faith and trust in God, we're like, it's a Pelagianism where we're wanting to say everything is on me. And if I don't do it all, it's, I'm on my own, And so maybe we could spend just a little bit of time, Nick, and just kind of get that sense of this, of like, just the challenge of like really trusting God and not putting all this on ourselves, but putting some of the burden maybe onto him, or just, responding in faith. What does it look like to kind of let go of some of this in your own life or experience?
It's definitely not easy. I mean, it's something you have to think about daily. And I was just what both you, Ben, and Charlie were talking about, maybe think a little bit about like within the family, right? So yeah, how do you get the family all on the same page? Because I've seen it where in my family and in other families, obviously too, it's hard to get all the everybody walking in the same direction or working towards the same goal. So, and it makes me think about what are some ways that we can better coordinate that with our families, because I think communication is very important in making sure that we're all working towards the same goal and fully relying on God the best that we can. We all know family dynamics and how difficult that can be, and how to strike that balance also within the family and within the career. Like we think about Martha and Mary in the gospel, where Mary's at the feet of Jesus, but Martha's busy working in the kitchen. Both things are necessary, and they're both saints today in the church. But I think one thing that's worked somewhat in my family is having a conversation at the dinner table, maybe saying thanks, having a blessing. Maybe it's something as simple as like payday, right? So when that money comes in on a monthly or biweekly basis, is just sitting down and talking about it and saying, this is our ultimate goal. This is what we're working for. This is why we're doing certain things in the family, and taking that into account.
Sure. So some of what you're suggesting, Nick, is like, look, I mean, maybe at the end of the day, what we just have to do is we have to practice our faith, right? So we do things like go to Sunday Mass, minimally. We fulfill our obligation there. If we can go more often, perhaps, we should do that, right? That's good for us. Attend to the sacraments, especially the sacrament of confession. We have a prayer life. We have conversations within our family. Something as simple as simply, doing your meal prayer. Like we bring faith home into the family. But at that point, if we've done that, then maybe we've done enough. This is where, Charlie, I'd like to get your thoughts, because, again, we're called to pour ourselves out, and there's like this notion of sacrifice, and we all, I think, have a hesitancy to really sacrifice. I mean, we think sacrifice is a great idea, and we love the idea of it, but when we actually are being asked to do something that's demanding and we have to pour ourselves out, we're like, why did I sign up for this?
Sure.
What was I thinking? Like, this is asking more of me than what I wanted to ask. And so, I mean, it can truly be demanding. Like what I'm, we don't want to be bare minimum Catholics. And I don't think, the gospel isn't setting that. I don't think the church wants us to be that. It's kind of funny. Like, we have these minimums because, like, look, if you want to at least be in good standing with the church, you got to hit the minimums. But, that's not what we're shooting for. That's just to be in good standing with the church. God calls, I think a lot of us. So what I'm trying to get at is, like, what do you envision? Do we just do the minimums, or how do we live this out fully, where we do pour ourselves out and we are sacrificial and it is demanding, but we still have this sense of boundaries and saying no, and not putting like the salvation of the world or the church upon our shoulders. Do you follow, or do you get what?
I'm tracking. I'm tracking. Yeah. What I hear is that as Catholics, as Christians, we want to give, we want to serve, and we all have that innate part of our hearts that we want to serve, we want to give out. Now, where I think we can get in trouble, though, is when we just start to give everything and then we don't do anything for ourselves. So what I like to think about here is an inch wide and a mile deep versus a mile wide and an inch deep. What's the right thing? Because we can become a mile wide, but we really can't give a lot of ourselves to what we're involved with. And is that really the best method? Is that what is God calling us to do versus if we're just in a few things, but then we can go really deep with those few things? One of the things that I'm involved with is the Knights of Columbus. And because of where I am in my life, a lot of these guys are retired and I'm not. I have 3 kids and there's a lot of family matters that I have to attend to. But since these guys, a lot of them are retired, they can really go deep and they're not committed a lot to different places. They're committed to the Knights, and the Knights will volunteer different organizations, intellectual disabilities and homeless shelters, etc. But those guys in there, they're really committed and they get a lot out of it. They get community, they get service, they get a lot out of it. Versus other people, myself included, I am involved with a lot of stuff, but I can't really be that involved because I'm involved in so many different places. So is it better to be across the board and never say no to things, but then you can't really give it your all? I think at the end of the day, where the answer is, it lies in prayer, because maybe God will be calling you to be a little bit more run thin to help mold you into a different calling that he has. So for instance, if I'm in the Knights and I volunteer somewhere else, I'm like, oh my gosh, but then God wants me to be over here because of my talents, and I start to get deep over here because it's a new season of life. And then also with the whole prayer aspect, it's listening to consolation and desolation when it comes to the Ignatian spirituality. What are you feeling in prayer? So with all this stuff, prayer is essential to find out, where is God leading me? Do I feel good about this? Do I feel bad about this? And not so much how I feel, but the consolation and desolation. Am I getting things out of prayer? Is God speaking me into prayer? And we're never supposed to make a decision in desolation. So if you don't feel like God's really speaking to you, then keep the course on what you're doing until you go back and feel that consolation time. And then maybe the Spirit will lead you in a different direction. But when it comes to thin versus, mile wide, mile deep, I think that God really wants us to be invested into different organizations versus just trying to do everything all at once.
Sure. So what I'm gathering from that, Charlie, is like, look, we're all called differently. God asked things of us differently. We're all given different talents. And so some of us are better at different things. Or maybe some of us are better at a lot of things. And some of us are only good at a few things, right? I mean, and our response to this is just to keep coming back to God and making ourselves available to him and asking for his guidance. But, we're also looking to others that we're committed to, our family, namely, and we're making sure that we're giving them, our family, their due justice too. And so even if we feel that God is asking a lot of it's got to be something, a lot of us, I should say, our family has to sign off on this, at least to some extent, right? I mean, like maybe there's a bit of an interpretation correction that needs to happen if, I want to go do something. And even if it's, let's say it's for the church, or if maybe it's for the Knights, and I feel called to do this, but then my wife isn't so keen on it. we need to get her feedback at least to say, hey, whether or not she thinks this is a good move for the family or for me or what have you. Is that kind of how this starts to balance itself out, Charlie? Be committed to God, have a life of prayer, but be in conversation with others that you have obligations to as well?
Well, I'd like to get you guys' thoughts here, because I think there's seasons on life. As younger men, we're called to the season of family, where our main priority is our family. Obviously, like Nick said, God, family second. But that trumps over career, over other things like extracurricular activities, other charitable organizations. But looking back at that night example, when you're in the retiree phase of your life, then you have more time to devote because you don't have young children. You can give yourself out more. And that's where the prayer comes in. Where is God leading me? Because if you are being really, really charitable with your time, but then you're not devoting it to your family, maybe God's calling you differently. And that's where that listening to the Spirit comes in. What do you guys think? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
And our ego, and actually really to be more spiritual in this, the devil, Satan is, the father of lies, right? As Jesus refers to him in the scriptures, he's very good at being deceitful and deceptive and misleading. And so maybe, Charlie, to your point, like that's why prayer is so important is, part of that Ignatian spirituality would be just say that there's a lot of voices that come into our head and not all of them are our voice or God's voice. So we need to be mindful as to which voice it is and who we're listening to. But Nick, do you have some thoughts to this as well, and in terms of how you're also navigating this?
Yeah, I think I really like Charlie's point there about the different stages in life, and I think it's really easy for a father of a family, a mother in a family to get too involved in or go too broad when you have that family responsibility. I think it is really important to go deep in your family responsibilities while you have the family there at home. And then when you're in a different lifestyle, when you're an empty nester, that can change completely, right? You can spread yourself out a little more at that point. But it's something to take into consideration because it's so easy for us to get pulled into, if we're not praying and listening and discerning, it's so easy to get pulled in different directions when we really should be focused on, the important things, which are, it's simple, but yet so hard to do sometimes. And then as that plays into finances as well. I mean, when it comes to finances for a family where the kids are young and growing and still getting ready to go off to college versus the finances, and the boundaries that we lay with our finances when you're close to retirement or in retirement per se can be very different as well. For example, setting boundaries on spending when you're with the family. Sure, I mean your spending is going to look a lot different when you have a family than when you're retired. So you need to take that into consideration, and your saving patterns as well. What you could do as far as charitable donations may be totally different as well. But I think we need to be aware of that because it's just so easy to get off a track.
But there are things, Nick, there's just a lot the world needs a lot, right? There's plenty of organizations that if you wanted to volunteer your time and give yourself to, they wouldn't say no to it, right? Because they could use the help and, they very well might want your help, but I think this is kind of at the heart of what I'm at least trying to get at is knowing when to say yes to something like that versus knowing when to say no and say, it's not that I don't think you're a good organization or you don't have good goals or you're not, you're not even a godly, institution or arrangement or a mission, but like I'm not supposed to be the one who gives to this. Like this has to come from somebody else because I'm not being called, I suppose, in short, right? Being asked of this, but that's what I'm trying to get at. It's like there's this level of like preserving reserves and boundaries for ourselves where we don't get overextended, but at the same time making ourselves available in which we are accepting of sacrificial action that is demanding and makes us uncomfortable. And so it's like, on one hand, we're trying to make ourselves comfortable by good financial decisions, but on the other hand, I feel like, our Christian call is to be, kept at least somewhat uncomfortable because if we're entirely comfortable, I don't know if we're listening. Charlie, am I wrong about this? What do you think?
So what I'm thinking is about I call it the guardian angel promptings. So, for instance, you're walking down the street, you see someone who's homeless, and you get a prompt in your head, go have a conversation with them. And you're like, I don't want to do that. And then you keep walking down, and then and then that could have been put there by a guardian angel to say, hey, God wanted to bless you there, and we all have free will, but you didn't choose that. And exactly, you missed it. And I think what you're saying, Ben, is listening to those promptings in your mind to say, okay, where where does God want me? And
Yeah.
if we're open to listening to God in our minds, we're going to be at a place where, oh, there's this organization over here that maybe I should get into. Or then if you get too involved, it might be like, oh, I got to pull back. And you'll get those promptings too. And we have choices where we don't have to listen to it. But at least in my life, when I've chosen not to listen to those promptings, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't go the way that I thought it would. And I end up feeling worse than if I would have just listened to that, even though it's hard to do at times. And those are the hardest times we get the most fruit when you follow through.
Yeah, so like responding to that call, it makes me think of like Samuel, where he's called in the middle of the night and says, here I am, Lord, your servant is listening, right? And it's like this beautiful response, but, it took a few prompts before he finally kind of caught on, right? But that's what he's supposed to do, right? And so, we're moved to do these things, but then for whatever reason, maybe it's just a hardness of heart, put simply, we say no to it,
Or it's uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. Well, thankfully, God's a loving God, and He's very persistent, and He doesn't let up. Right. So He does. That probably won't be your last prompting, which is the good news. You'll get another one. But maybe, Nick, just to circle back to this, because you were the one who suggested this, and I feel like it does maybe just settle it all out. Like, look, put God first, and if this really is, God knows what you can handle and what you can't handle. He knows what's good for you. He knows what's not good for you. Like if we are following Him and listening to Him, He'll know how much of a cross He wants you to bear, but He won't give a cross to you more than what you need to bear. So like we don't need to go and seek out bigger crosses than what God intends for us just to try to demonstrate our desire to love or be faithful to Him. Like we just need to seek out the cross that He wants to give to us, right? Is that just at the heart of what this is all about?
Yeah, that's a great point. And back to Charlie's, consolation and desolation is just listening to what God puts in your heart, and that can give you some real peace. We don't have to prove anything. We're loved by God, and as long as we let God come in and be a part of us and be a part of our family every day, that's really what it boils down to. It's just there's so much noise on a daily basis, and there's more and more every day with technology and kids going this way, spouse going this way. How do you keep everybody on the same page? I think in that, when it comes to that, it's you have to get a little bit more creative now maybe than even in the past, just because there's just so many more things tugging on us every way. And it's what we're talking about is maybe just so simple, but when you have all this noise, it's not that simple. So in practice, it can be very difficult. What we're talking about is very straightforward.
When you said it could be very difficult, it made me think about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Brother Lawrence's, is it In Conversation with God? Is that the title of the book? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Maybe, why don't you share a little bit more, Charlie, in case the audience...
So Brother Lawrence, I don't know, it's either Conversation with God or In Conversation with God, but his whole premise, so he was a monk from the Middle Ages, and his whole premise was he wanted to try to listen to God's voice at all times, and he had so much trouble, and the whole book is about him having trouble because all these other voices got into his head, his own thoughts and everything. But just, and like you said, Nick, it's so noisy out there. But trying to always listen to God's voice is so imperative. And I am not a good example of it because there's so many times throughout the day where I stray and everything. But that's one thing that I want to try to do as well, is as we can listen to God's voice, we can start to feel more confident and comfortable about where He's leading us. And then we have, especially when it comes to the being too busy, being not busy enough. Because if we're not busy enough too, God's going to lead us, be like, hey, maybe you need to get more out there in the world. Maybe you need to pick up the phone or do this or do that. God's always going to lead us. And it may not be easy, like I said, but having that voice in our heads. And I'm gonna get the book for the show notes. I want to definitely give it to you so it can be in the show notes of It's Brother Lawrence for sure. I believe it's In Conversation with God, but it's a great, great read.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that recommendation, Charlie. No, yeah, I feel like we're pulling it together in terms of the topic and just some of the challenges that are in play here. But this is, this is just deeply informative because, one of the things I find most fascinating about our work, especially when it just comes to finances, and, a lot of financial decisions ultimately come down to resources. And when you start thinking of resources, you start getting into this whole notion of an economy. And what's interesting about economic matters is that, we're, as humans, I think we have, effectively unlimited desire matched with limited resources, right? Even if one of us wanted to save the world, let's just say we even felt moved and thought that that's what was being asked of us, like we quite frankly couldn't, because we don't have the resources to pull it off. Like there's only just so much available to us. And so like part of the reason why I feel maybe you're getting overstretched or overdemanded is there's quite literally more out available than what any one of us certainly individually could in need was supply. Like it's with this be overwhelming and would overrun us. And so kind of why we're discussing this isn't just for good spiritual practices, but it also just to bring home the importance of having boundaries in your finances, because your money can only do so much, and eventually it would get completely eaten up and exhausted. And so there's a kind of a question of like where should you be applying your money, and what's the right amount to apply it, and to what ends or endeavors, and when is it okay to say no to this good organization so you can say yes to this other or good organization, whether it's with your time, talent, and treasure or what have you. Like, again, we can't say yes to everything because it would be too much. And so I think one thing that I'd like to propose for anyone who's listening is like, thankfully there is an organization that at least has Catholic financial advisors, the Catholic Financial Planners Network, in which you can go find an advisor who can help give you guidance and direction in your finances on these sort of questions, and help you know, in keeping with your faith, what it is that, maybe God's asking you to do with your money. We're rightfully, it's okay for us to say no and to place boundaries, but it's certainly not the Christian call to say no to everything. You have to say yes to something. Minimally, you have to say yes to God, as you were alluding to, Nick. And so again, you could work with an advisor who can help kind of figure out, what makes sense for you to say yes to, maybe what makes sense for you to say no to, as far as your financial matters are concerned. But Nick, I kind of want to kick it over to you. Does that resonate with you? That, at the end of the day, like what kind of drives this tension is that, we're interesting as humans. Again, we have this unlimited desire matched with limited resources. It's like, this is just like a perennial thing that we're all working our way through. Do you think that's right, or would you have a different interpretation on it?
I think that's right. And it makes me think a little bit also about boundaries, as far as when we, as financial planners, we know about behavioral finance. There's cognitive dissonances and emotional as well. So just as a general example, boundaries can also be a kind of a limiting factor when it comes to using resources, because, for example, a client may come in and they've inherited money from a parent, right, that passed away. So they kind of build this wall around it, right? They want to protect it. They don't want to take any risk with it. They don't want to, because it has that attachment to their relationship, kind of a mental accounting bucket, an attachment to that relationship. So, but yet at the same time, they're kind of keeping God out of it. They're not letting God work through that resource to either help the family or help others or whatever that purpose may be. So I just thought I'd add that in there as kind of a financial thought. I don't know if you guys have had similar conversations with clients in the past about that. And that's a delicate conversation. I mean, it's something that's very, very emotional. But it's also an opportunity where we can try to listen to what's happening in our lives and how God might want to help us use resources for the good of the kingdom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe some of the work that we have as advisors is to nudge our clients along and, help them to, I don't want to say we don't want to force them to take risk, but maybe move them in a direction they wouldn't want to at least naturally take. That, we could see, at least from our perspective, this looks good for you, but they have their hesitancy for whatever reason to go in that direction as well. Charlie, what about you? Do you have thoughts on this notion of like limited resources met with unlimited desire? Do you feel like that captures part of the issue that's in play here, or would you take another spin on it?
So when it comes to this, it reminds me of a book that I read. It's called 4,000 Weeks. I don't know if you guys know it. Actually, I have it right here because I just read it. But the whole concept is we only have 4,000 weeks of life until we go to the great beyond. And those 4,000 weeks equates about to 80 years of life. And we're never going to have enough time to do everything on our to-do list, ever. So the book says is that we intentionally do what we want to do, and we don't worry about the rest because we don't have enough time to worry about everything. So if you intentionally not do something, then that's equally as good as trying to do everything and doing it poorly. Because if you intentionally do the things that you want to do, you're going to live a greater life than if you try to do it all, because there's just not enough time. And with that, when it comes, that thought process on top of the God process can really work a lot when you start using prayer and consolation, desolation, like the Ignatian spirituality, and knowing that we only have so much time. And now that I'm 40, this is a quick side note. So I turned 40 this year.
All right, congratulations, Charlie.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So 1985, way to go.
Here we go.
But now that I'm 40 and I hear about people passing away, it affects me a lot different. It's like, oh man, it's not, when I heard it when I was 20 or my grandma died when I was young, it wasn't the same. Now it's like, oh my gosh, my aunt just passed away recently, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like, then you hear all the people dying, in the news and everything. You're just like, time is one of the greatest resource, and use it well, because we don't have a lot of it.
Yeah, amen to that, Charlie. I don't know if there's much I can add to it. It is so true. I'm over the age of 40 as well, over the hill, as they say. And it's maybe they call it over the hill because it's all downhill from here. Hopefully, I don't know, downhill in a good way, bad way. I'm not sure. But definitely more white hairs popping up. I'll say that much for sure. But yeah, that sense where sadly, you'll see people who just suddenly die for, it's natural causes, but unexpected, maybe a heart attack, and they're just in their mid to late 40s. And it's like, wow, God, I mean, that could be me. And we kind of think we're going to live forever, but I think we all know rather realistically that we're not. No one thinks they're going to live forever, at least not physically here, right? But then we know that death is something we'll all have to confront and face, but we act and think that death is, decades away. And like, it's guaranteed to be decades away. I'm still 30 or 40 years old. Like, I'm not going to pass away until I'm 70 or 80 at least, right? But we may not be quite so fortunate. And so maybe this, Nick, just keeps coming back to why we have to put God first, because even that question is all on God's time, right? And it's not up to us to make that decision. And so, maybe what we have to do fundamentally is we just have to let go of this being ours and give it all back to Him, and then let Him play out His plan, because, and to some extent, what other choice do we have? Right? I mean, if we can't give it back all to Him, He's the one who's running the whole show, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Just try to get things in order the most you can beforehand. So
yeah,
yep.
And going back to the planning topic, if you're young, get life insurance. If you have kids, so see what we did there.
That's right, absolutely.
That way,
we work with a good advisor. Yeah, there you go. We'll get you all covered in those ways. Well, Charlie and Nick, thanks for spending some time with this. This has been something I've been wrestling with for several weeks now, and just kind of wondering. And part of why it has a place in our own heart is my wife works from home, or works out of the home as well, and as she's is hitting strides in her career, she's asked to do extracurricular activities, myself as well, and so. Above and beyond our business commitments, we have, other commitments. People are asking for us our time and attention, and we certainly want to be giving, and we want to give ourselves to others and do, be good stewards of what God has given to us and to say yes to him. But, we only go so far, right? Is the reality. And as generous as I might be in my heart, I may not actually be as generous when the time comes to when my wife's away for the evening, right? So like trying to know what's the right amount. Charlie, I just feel like both of you have answered this. Nick, you've told us that, look, you got to keep God first. Like really, that's what decides this whole thing. And Charlie, your answer is like, you got to pray. Like there's no way to know what God is asking of you unless to pray. So keep God first, pray. And, the rest of this is just details.
And the one thing about that too is that even if you make the wrong choice, God's going to work with that as well. It's not like we make a wrong choice and you don't pass go, you don't collect $200. God works with everything. So
yeah, God's got the ultimate say, so he can always put things back
make it work
in
right?
order. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Oh man, I tell you what, that just gives a lot of reassurance and satisfaction and happiness. I'm sure for me, hopefully it does for the audience as well. So Nick and Charlie, thanks again so much for joining me and having this chat. For anyone who wants to find out more about Nick or Charlie, you can go to the Catholic Financial Planners Network and you can find their profiles online there. Be sure to be checking out the advisors with the Catholic Financial Planners Network. We continue to grow. It's just fantastic. It's one of those things that just tickles me pink because, we're growing by 2 or 3 members, I think, every month. And so the network is getting to be larger and larger. But Charlie, if outside of the Catholic Financial Planners Network, if somebody wanted to find you, what's the best website for them to turn to?
Yeah, you can go to www.focusedupfinancial.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well as Facebook, too.
Great. And then for you, Nick, if someone wanted to follow up with you on your website, how could they go about doing that as well?
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn. You can also find me at mylastname.com. So that's ORENDUFF.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, Charlie and Nick, thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you to audience for listening. And if just to throw this out there, if you have any topics you'd like for us to go over and discuss, we're certainly open ears for that. Otherwise, we just keep turning to the Holy Spirit to guide our conversations. But if you have something you'd like for us to answer specifically, reach out to the info@catholicfpn.com email address, and you can pass that information along. Otherwise, we send God's blessings along to each and every one of you. Thanks for so much for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thank you. God bless.